Alrighty, we can go ahead and get started. I want to first say thank you all for joining us. My name is Dylan Huffpower, and I am an admissions counselor here at Tulane University School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. Today is one of our really unique and exciting events that we've had virtually during National Public Health Week. Throughout the week, we featured many of our faculty members, which has been awesome, and their unique experience and research. But today we get to talk about how Tulane plans to remain on the front lines during and post pandemic, once we get there, when we can actually say post pandemic, but also talking about how has the leadership at our school changed through the pandemic and in recent new and evolving conversations of diversity, equity, inclusion, which are obviously now more important than ever? What has changed and how are we going to stay at the front of that? So before I introduce our four panelists, I want to say I want all of our attendees watching, please feel free to join in the conversation by using the Q&A feature. That's where I'm going to be keeping an eye on for questions while we go throughout the town hall in the discussion. So please try not to use the chat and use the Q&A option so that I'll be able to see the questions and I'll get notified and we'll be able to answer your questions that way. So Q&A instead of chat. The first panelist I'd like to introduce is Dean Thomas LaVeist. He is obviously the Dean of the School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. I would next like to introduce Dr. Eva Silvestri. She is one of our directors of an MPH program, as well as a faculty member. Dr. Alicia Battle is an associate dean for online programs and has recently done some really exciting things with our newer online programs, which is awesome. And Leslie Bayonne, which is a member of a really important office on campus for those students who are recently admitted and current students, the Office of Student Experience. So now we can start off with Dean LaVeist. If you guys want to each kind of talk about your journey into public health for a brief moment, and what you do more specifically with the school now.
Hey, thank you, Dylan. So my journey into public health, a lot of people they find their way into public. Like I journeyed into public health through a circuitous route. It wasn't like I planned it out. I didn't grow up wanting to be a public health professional. In fact, I didn't even know public health existed until I was in graduate school. So I went to undergraduate school at a small historically black college in Maryland called the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, where I majored in sociology and went back to New York, where I grew up after college, and took a job working as a social worker, working with homeless people in Manhattan. And um, basically, my job was to try to find placements for people that needed housing, and I'd spend the day. I'd come in the office in the morning and I'd get a list of people that needed housing. I'd pretty much spend the day trying to get them placed. And sometimes I would get through the list and sometimes I didn't get through the list. But whether I did or not, the next morning there was always a new list. And so I started to wonder, what's producing this list and what can we do about that? And became more interested in that. And so I decided that maybe if I go on to graduate school, get a PhD in sociology, and I'd understand something about, policy and social systems and be able to understand how we can do something about this problem. And that was, and so I left that job and went to a graduate school working on a PhD. And while working on that PhD, I was literally writing my dissertation when I discovered that there was this thing called, at the time we didn't have a terminology for it, but basically we now refer to it as racial inequities in health. A report had come out from the Department of Health and Human Services that kind of summarized the disparities by race. And I just became fascinated. I said, well, why does this exist, and what can we do about this? This is a problem that I really want to focus on. So I got the idea that I would finish my degree in sociology and then do a postdoctoral training in public health. And when I got over to the School of Public Health, I learned that they didn't know why the race disparities existed, and there weren't many people even trying to figure it out. And that then I decided at that point that I would devote my career to addressing that question. Why do we have racial disparities in health, and what can we do about it? So that was how I wound up in public health. And so now, after many years of doing many things, I'm now dean of this school, and very proud and happy to be doing that and trying to use the school now to address that issue of how do we deal with health equity and how do we create a more equitable society.
Thank you so much. I will go ahead and pass it on to Dr. Battle next.
Great, thank you. Um, uh, Much like the Dean LaVeist's journey to public health, I wasn't 12 and saying, hey, when I grow up, I'm gonna be a public health practitioner. In fact, my undergraduate degree is in philosophy. I was on the path to go to law school, but as a single mom at the time, my daughter was 3. I did not feel ready or equipped to move far away from my social support network, which was my parents and my sisters. And so I was going to take a year or so off. But also as a single mom at a state institution, I wasn't equipped to start paying back my student loans either. So I was like, okay, let me enroll in some classes and defer student loan payment, repayment for a year, and work on getting my LSAT score up. I enrolled in 4 different classes. The most memorable for me is epidemiology. The epi class was it was a seminar taught on Monday nights. It had an English class and a history class, stuff that I was interested in. I fell in love with public health during that course. I walked into the room, sat down, and being a philosophy major at a predominantly white institution, I was the only Black graduate in like 5 years from my program. There were no Black faculty, no Black staff working in that department at the time. And in walks the professor. She was the most beautiful Black woman I had ever seen, and the first African-American professor I had had. My dad was in the military, so we moved around, and I had transferred into this university. And all of a sudden she started talking, and she was passionate about epidemiology. And as she was speaking that night, I was introducing us to what that is and what epi does and what epidemiologists do out in the field. The light bulb went on in my head, and it was like, ooh, this is a really cool way to practically apply all of the things that I had learned as a philosopher. I use my philosophy degree every day in public health. And I was introduced because for the first time, I saw myself. I knew plenty of Black attorneys. My older sister was an attorney, but I'd never met a PhD that looked like me. So Tuesday morning, I got up, I dropped all of those other classes, I applied for the program, got admitted to the program, and I have not looked back. Right now, my practice setting has always been colleges and universities. I study the social epidemiology of substance using behaviors among college student subpopulations, specifically specializing in substance use and the intersection of substance use and sexuality among African-American college students. And so I have found myself in a number of different positions, but for a little over 22 years, I was a practitioner on the other side of campus. And then I came to the classroom full time. And because again, it's that not seeing yourself, understanding the importance of training up other public health practitioners that look like me that can then go back out into the community. And sometimes we have a tough time recruiting and then retaining students because they don't see themselves or feel like the institution honors their background and their stories. So I'll stop there because I could go on about it, and I will popcorn it over then to Dr. Silvestre.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eva Silvestri, and I am a professor in what is currently the Department of Global Community Health and Behavioral Sciences. But starting July 1st, I will be in the Department of International Health and Sustainable Development. And I am the MPH Program Director for the International Health and Sustainable Development Program. And so my area of expertise is a little bit in international health. And I've been interested in international and health in general my entire life. A little bit different story than my colleagues that said before. But I was born in Guatemala, and some of my earliest childhood memories was there was a very big earthquake in Guatemala. So some of my earliest childhood memories is seeing reconstruction, disaster management in action. And I have a lot of memories of my father being very involved in the reconstruction post-earthquake. And it was also a time where I remember one of my first memories that I can still remember to this day is watching a community video or a community, like it was a movie where they would literally put up like a sheet outside and they showed a video about how to prevent hookworm infection. Right. So it's like, so from my very earliest memory, I was like, oh, you can get a worm in your foot. And then you can get sick and then it could create, like all these illnesses. And so I've always just been very interested in those issues. And then our family moved to the United States in 1981. We were political asylum seekers during the Guatemalan Civil War. And we eventually settled in a community of Guatemalan and Mexican and other, Latin American immigrants in rural Florida. So there I also had a lot of experience dealing with health issues of, still kind of international communities, but now living in the United States. And I wrote my entrance exam to go to college. I went to Cornell University, and the reason why I chose it was because it was the only place I could study international nutrition, because I was from the very beginning always just interested in international issues and health. I did a master's in anthropology, but then decided that anthropology was too theoretical, and all of my work, all of my interests in health was really just so much more applied, which is why then I decided to choose to do my PhD in public health, just because everything, I didn't want to just study, why we, these things. I wanted to see what we could do, what we could actually do in order to improve health outcomes for people. And so that's kind of my journey to how I got here. And then also my research is in monitoring and evaluation of health programs, but also I've been more involved also recently with diversity, equity, and inclusion here at the university. Dean LaVeist last summer asked me to chair the School of Public Health's Anti-Racism Task Force, which I will probably get a little bit more time to talk about, but I'm going to now pass it over to Leslie.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I regret Dean Valenzuela couldn't join us today, but I'm happy to speak on her behalf. I'm Leslie Bayonne, and I'm the Department Administrator for the SPHTM Office of Student Experience. And I've been with Tulane for 10 years, and I very much enjoy working with students who are public health leaders and problem solvers. I know that some people's existence as survival really depends very much on your efforts as students and far beyond. And supporting those who are making the world a better place is critical to me. When I was pursuing my undergraduate degree, public health was never presented as an option. So my background is in business management and human resources, which helps me very much in working in the areas of managing OSE with Dean Valenzuela, budgeting, course scheduling, and organizing new student orientation, which was transformed to address the public health issues of health equity, racism, and social justice during the morning programming. So even though I was not thoroughly familiar with public health until I joined SPHTM, it's something that I've believed in all along, and now I have a name for it, and it's something that I'm very glad to be a part of.
Thank you, and thank you all for that introduction. I think it just goes to show that, and this is something I've learned in my time, my 2 years at Tulane, that there is no correct path in public health. There's no one specific way to reach your dream job, and you may have a goal in mind in public health right now, and 6 months from now, you may have a new dream job within public health because there is so much ground to cover. And we'll help you cover it at Tulane. The first thing I want to talk about is with Dean LaVeist. I'm curious, and I know people watching as well are curious, how has COVID and the pandemic impacted leadership within the school?
That's a, you can go a lot of ways with that question. Well, I mean, I can speak for myself. I mean, in addition to serving as dean, I'm also the co-chair of the governor's COVID Health Equity Task Force, and so I'm working very closely with the state on with testing, and now we're working very closely with the state with distribution of the vaccine and trying to deal with the equity issues. So personally, it's affected me because I basically have a second full-time job now, and it's been quite quite a bit to take on doing that in addition to being running the school. I think it affected the overall leadership of the school, however, in that we had to figure out how do we continue instruction with a pandemic, how do we do it safely and with an eye towards the science. And I think we did really a fantastic job as a university overall. We did not go fully online like many of our peers did. We continued to have in-person classes last year. As part of the university that process made that happen as well. So I think this was a case where public health was at the table, at the forefront. Leadership of the university, leadership of the city of New Orleans, and leadership of the state of Louisiana all listened to the public health experts and made decisions based on the input that we gave them. And it showed, and I think that the Louisiana fared so well and Tulane fared so well is the result of leadership being guided by science.
Absolutely. And from a staff member perspective, I've noticed that SPHTM has gone above and beyond to keep the student experience first, because at the end of the day, we have these students and we want them to go out into the world being those public health professionals that are going to change public health, but they can't do that if they aren't getting that education. So going along with that, Leslie, can you maybe talk about some of the ways that the school has focused on the student experience, particularly through the pandemic?
Sure. So first of all, I want to say that really SPHTM is very lucky to have the leadership that we have, especially at this time under Dean LaVeist and the other new and existing faculty and administrators. So the school and OSC really has taken a new direction. In particular for OSC, the hiring of Dean Valenzuela to focus primarily on students during the pandemic was a major step. Our office was always focused on students, but really we've elevated and redirected our intentionality towards addressing student needs and reflecting our mission, which highlights the office's role in cultivating an environment of student success, inclusion, support, engagement, and innovation, and also fostering a diverse community of leaders and problem solvers.
And on that note, did anybody else want to add about how your leadership changed during the pandemic or your specific position, or maybe you worked on specific student resources to better aid students during the pandemic?
I'll hop in. I know that some of the conversations that I have as being responsible for online programs, one of the things that we've been intentional about, and I meet with the program faculty, specifically community health sciences. We brought on board the environmental health science online programs this spring, but meeting with all of the faculty, checking in with them to make sure that they were okay, and then it allowed us, those faculty meetings allowed us the space to triage and really hone in on what is happening with our students, because our students knew they were going to be online. They applied for an online program. But that didn't change that we were all living through a global pandemic. And while they had originally signed up to be an online student and juggle what was happening at work and their family lives, now their kid is sitting next to them and they're doing homeschooling. Some of our students that were working full-time lost their jobs during the pandemic. And so it's us pivoting and making sure that we are meeting our students where they are. I work very closely with Dean Venezuela to make sure that we are providing some wraparound services for our students. But definitely the pandemic shifted even what online instructors think of as being student focused. For example, if you have a student that can't meet a hard deadline for turning in a paper, can we be a little more flexible with our students in some of those deadlines? Because they're not just dealing with the ordinary competing priorities when you're in an online program. We've also added this other dynamic. We did have students that got sick and that we had to then provide a leave of absence for. So it was us just as a team of faculty and then staff. We have student success coaches that work with us, really paying closer attention than we normally would have. And then encouraging our students to check in with each other in a different way and differently than we had even previous to that. I host a happy hour, a virtual happy hour, and I've had several faculty and even the dean zoom in to those events. And it's an opportunity for us to just check in outside of the classroom and just be present. So that's how some of the things have shifted for online students.
Can I add something, Dylan? Just also, so Alicia, Dr. Battle was talking about the online program specifically, but we all had to shift a year ago to online, right? And that was difficult. It was a challenge for faculty. It was a challenge for students because particularly for our on-ground students, they weren't expecting an online experience. And then we had to shift in order to be, adaptive to public health emergency, right? But something else too, so even like moving forward to the fall, the university as a whole through our Center for Engaged Learning and Teaching offered a course on how to kind of really set up, how to really do online instruction, right? Because again, a lot of us, myself included, I'd never taught a class entirely online, right? And so we had to kind of prepare for what the fall was going to look like. And as Dean LaVeist mentioned, we were able to offer an in-person experience, but it was still kind of in a hybrid model. And so I think it was really important that the dean's office offered a stipend for faculty to take this course, because it was a course that it was like a month-long course where we had to have assignments, we had reading assignments, we had to meet with our groups, we had to do all of it again, on all online, of course. And so I think that really helped because that really improved the quality of the courses in the fall, that we were all, that a lot of faculty were able to take advantage of this opportunity to take this course to really improve how we were delivering courses online and in these kind of hybrid models.
Can I add one thing to that? And I think
Absolutely.
students would be interested in knowing about. So I had a goal of bringing much more of the school's portfolio of courses online before the pandemic happened. And the goal, I thought I'd get there maybe about 5 or 6 years. And what we wanted to get to is where students could then have the option for taking, as we continue to build out our online portfolio, it'll become increasingly possible for students to be in a residential program, a regular in-person program, but still take online courses. And that's what we want to get to, where the modality of how the course is delivered is really not relevant. You can apply to the online program, you can take in-person classes if you live in New Orleans. You can apply to the in-person program, but if there's a course that's offered online and it meets your schedule and it makes sense for you to take it, you should be able to just take it. And we're still not entirely there. There are a number of issues that have to be worked out, and a lot of it is technical stuff, which I won't bore you with. But ultimately, we want to get there. But I think we've moved ahead, I don't know, years closer to that goal, because we did bring a good portion of our courses online in last year, and did it in a quality way, which means that we actually can use those courses going forward.
I think also something that, and this is something out of the Office of Student Experience that's new, that wasn't happening as before, was all these kind of the events that you have with like the coffee and like where you give breakfast, and there was a like a crawfish boil, you know. So there's so even as we're slowly opening up, right? We know like these in-person kind of social activities are really important. And I think that that's been a really positive change, has been just some of that kind of social fun programming that has been coming out of the Office of Student Experience, which will, of course, will only expand as we are able to do more.
Yeah, most definitely. I actually had a little rundown of things that the Office of Student Experience has accomplished here, mostly during the spring semester. So kind of getting on to some of the student resources and the newer focus on improving student experience. We also have a new downtown academic success center in partnership with the Office of Student Success and Strategic Initiatives, which has a peer tutoring, an academic writing center, and supplemental instruction. And to take advantage of these services, you can visit the Academic Learning and Tutoring Center webpage, which I can drop that link here in a little bit. But all tutoring sessions are currently being held virtually, and we hope to offer in-person and virtual options in fall 2021. Another student experience item is that you all probably know Susan Cantrell, who's our enrollment manager, but she's our primary veteran school certifying official. And many schools have a veteran resource center and programs. And this is something that the Office of OSC is really wanting to focus on for a while. So we now have a GA focused on veteran and military connected students. We really are in the development stages and invite anyone to assist with student engagement in this area, including meetings and events. This semester, OSC hosted a Medal of Honor celebration. And to show our support for recipients, there was a writing station to create thank you cards. And it really was a lovely event. It came together perfectly. And it was very therapeutic to honor those who have served our country through old-fashioned letter writing. So a future OSC initiative that I wanted to put out there is going to possibly be launching on fall 2021. And it's a new mentoring program for new BIPOC students, depending on the availability of funding. As part of the new scholarship program, it's called Future Leaders in Public Health. The FLPH Peer Mentoring Program will serve as a system of support, coaching, and advising for scholarship recipients. This is an intentional and planned mentoring community formed by incoming students from underrepresented communities and returning students who are in good standing with SPHTM. So we had hoped that with you all joining us today, that this would be something you'd be interested in. And as Dr. Silvestre mentioned, we had a new OSC programming this past spring, including a welcome back to Tidewater. We hope you all enjoyed those coffee hours and the crawfish boil. And we're always open to suggestions and feedback about our programming. Dean Valenzuela, Roz, and I also advise SPHTM SGA, and they're going to be having the annual Thought Symposium that's coming up, which I'm sure everyone has probably heard about. So really, throughout the pandemic, we've, and especially this spring, OSC has had a full semester. And really, it wasn't all it could have been without the COVID restrictions, but congratulations to each of you for making it through. And I hope you know that OSC is here for you now beyond your time as a graduate student.
Thank you. And speaking of the crawfish boil, the school is now on TikTok. I know many of you watching might be on TikTok. It's a really fun app, very popular right now. So please follow us. It's at Tulane SPHTM. And I made a TikTok about the crawfish boil. So if you don't know what crawfish is, or if you've never been to a crawfish boil, check us out on TikTok and our other social media. But going into more of an outward presence with the school, Dr. Silvestri, can we talk a little bit about maybe how the school is addressing those recent issues about equity, inclusion, diversity? Maybe what are you doing possibly within the school, but also outward as well too? And then if anyone else has anything else to add as well.
Sure. So again, this year, the last 12 months have just been, I mean, brutal is one way to put it, right? But again, it was a time when, you know, health disparities, systemic racism were just in the forefront. And this is not only due to COVID-19, but then also to, you know, killings of Black and other individuals of color that led to a lot of protests, a lot of, you know, events, like, you know, the white coats for Black lives, like a lot of just kind of this, you know, really kind of questioning, like, what are we doing? Like, there's so much that is going on and we really need to do more. And so back in June of 2020, Dean LaVeist convened a town hall for the whole school that included, you know, faculty, staff, and students to really kind of address and to kind of lay out what his vision was for how do we deal with racism within academic public health, right? Because eventually, like, we're training the people who are going to go out, right, and deal with these issues. And we really, and it really kind of caused us to kind of like reflect and sit back and say, like, are we training people adequately to do this, right? And so this is only not only in how do we deal with the different populations, but it's also like, how do we deal with our own institutions? Like, what is happening within our own institutions that could be improved, right? And so we established the school's anti-racism task force that was divided into several committees. One was the scholarship committee, which Leslie already alluded to. That is a new scholarship that was developed called the Future Public Health Leaders that is going to, you know, start off with a cohort of BIPOC students that are coming in to get their master's in public health. In addition to a scholarship that is part of the package, there's also going to be a mentoring program, because we know that there's just not enough. It's not giving people to come to a university is not enough, and it's something that, you know, the Tulane University does with programs at the undergraduate level, with like with Posse, with College Track, where we, you know, we create these cohorts and then kind of do mentoring of students as they go through the process. And I'm a current College Track mentor to undergraduate students here. And so it's going to be a similar program, but for at the master's level. Another committee focused on our courses. And so this is something, again, Dean LaVeist mentioned when his first interest in public health was really looking at, like, why are there these racial disparities, right? And so, and even like to this day, it's kind of looking at how are we addressing racial disparities within our own courses, right? So it's everything from like just saying, you know, that, you know, African Americans or Latinos or Native Americans have higher risk for diabetes or have higher risk for this. Well, that's not enough. We need to really try to understand why these disparities exist, why, you know, why these things are happening at the community level, at the level of our healthcare institutions, at the level of our educational systems, at the level of our city planning, right? So it's just, again, really kind of stepping back and looking more broadly at these kind of social determinants of health. So one of the first steps that committee has done is to develop new core competencies that address specific anti-racism issues that will be incorporated into our core courses. So then that was one committee that looked specifically at just our curriculum, like how are we training people? How are we training the future public health leaders of America and of the world? And then we also have kind of a larger initiatives committee that was split up into couple of other committees, including the Training and Development Committee. And this is one that Dr. Battle has also been involved in. But this is also kind of looking at what kind of trainings do we need to do professionally, like, so this is beyond just what is offered in courses, but what kinds of trainings do faculty need in order to become, better teachers of these issues of health disparities and systemic racism? What do they need in order to be able to have really meaningful conversations within the classroom? How to manage the classroom? But then also we needed to have, kind of training on our own, like our own implicit bias and how that plays out in the classroom for our students. And then we also are in the process of developing what we're calling an equity scorecard. So it's just looking at our own, again, taking a hard look at our own internal metrics in terms of how our students succeeding or not, in our school, looking at everything at who's applying, who's accepted, who doesn't come, who's accepted. And then once they get here, do they get job opportunities, employment opportunities, research opportunities? How long does it take for them to graduate, et cetera? All of these metrics at the student level, but then also looking, at faculty and staff as well in terms of their diversity and their own metrics as well for success. So that's just a quick snapshot.
Thank you for that. There's a lot going on within the school, specifically in regard to the topic of diversity and inclusion. And I think we have a hand raised. Priscilla. Okay, I just asked to unmute. I think it should work now.
Okay.
We can hear you. Did you have a specific question?
My question is my question mainly is to ask the scholarship available for international students, because of the economic meltdown, I've written to some schools to ask to request for a reduction in fee, because we know there's economic meltdown in the whole world, and we're actually expecting that schools, universities abroad should kind of give some discount more than the normal scholarship that they have been given. So this will afford a lot of us who are still willing to progress our education further, to able to afford the fees. Because like, I just miss another year again, and I'm really not happy about that. And it's all boils down to funding. So if one is able to get a reasonable scholarship discount from school fees, it will really help a lot of us to able to get back to school and still achieve our dreams, irrespective of the COVID crisis that has been on ground in the past years. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
I hope I was audible enough.
Thank you.
Was I audible enough?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
All right.
This is an area where we are challenged. This is something that we just are not able to provide the level of support that we'd like to be able to provide really to all students, but there's a particular problem with international students. There are different requirements around providing scholarships, especially externally funded scholarships, and we have limitations on how much funds we have available for that, and it's just an ongoing challenge. It's one of the areas that I'm prioritizing, which is trying to raise money to build an endowment so that we can provide more financial support for international students. But unfortunately, we just aren't there right now, and we have very limited resources in that area.
Thank you. So I want to turn it over to Dr. Battle to talk about some of the initiatives, whether they're diversity focused or student experience focused, whatever they may be, for those online programs that you work with.
Well, we can talk about both, because both I think they're connected and inextricably interrelated. in that I find it difficult to say that we are going to train competent professionals to be able to hit the ground running when they've graduated and they are not equipped to work in diverse communities. And when we say diversity, we're not just talking about race and ethnicity, although that is very important. Diversity of geology, geography, thought, experience and background, gender, those are all just as vital and important to the classroom. And specifically in the virtual classroom, as with the residential classroom, the more diverse your student body is, the more students have an opportunity to learn and grow from one another. If you're not exposed to people that are different than you, and the differences, again, go well beyond race and ethnicity when you start talking about the intersection of identities, it just makes for a richer experience. That said, some of the really exciting initiatives that we have are our strategic partnerships and some of the pipeline that we're looking to build. For example, we have a newer partnership with Xavier School of Pharmacy. We know that pharmacists are a part of the front lines and have been working really hard during COVID-19. In fact, some of the big box pharmacies have some of the Xavier grads working front and center. So it's them being able to have a dual degree program so that they're matriculating at Xavier School of Pharmacy while at the same time being in our online MPH programs, because we have several. That's one. Another partnership that's cool and interesting and unlike anything else in the country is our partnership with Historically Black Fraternal Organization. That press release is due to come out in the next couple of weeks, but we have partnered with Alpha Phi Alpha, and it is something to grow the number of African-American males specifically, although it's an integrated organization, been integrated since 1945. But I have found with reviewing applications that there is a dearth of Black men applying at least to our programs. And when I reach out and I talk to some of my colleagues that are doing online programs at other CEF accredited institutions, they're seeing the same things. And this has been a trend at least for the last 8-10 years. And so to increase the number of males applying to our online programs, we have partnered with the fraternal organization. How best to address that as a need. Another along those same lines, we are in the middle of planning what we are calling the Matthias de Souza Leadership Summit. Matthias de Souza was the first African-American to hold public office in this country. He was a freed slave that held an office at the State House in the state of Maryland. So we have partnered with St. Mary's College, Historic St. Mary's City, which is the museum that grew up around that historic site, and the NAACP to provide a leadership summit. And this summit has two tracks, one for undergraduate students that want to go on to graduate and professional school, and the other track are for current graduate and professional students. The idea or the brainchild for this arose when I was looking at some of the feedback that we've gotten from some of our employers saying that some of our students lack skills in certain areas. And when you're dealing with a completely online population, finding time in the day to have programs around certain areas, it's just untenable because we have students right now from 40 different states and across all of the time zones. So having a program that's convenient to everybody was just not going to happen. So what we're doing is we're hosting this leadership summit. It will happen in the fall, and it will allow us to provide the programming for all of our students, and we're inviting others to join us as well. But to be able to provide those skills training that's very much needed that our students just wouldn't have the opportunity to get because they're working full time or they have families. And so we'll be sending out that save the date so that They can mark their calendars, and our current students and our new students and our admitted students can register and be a part of that series of learning experiences. So it's one Saturday to knock it all out. And then I'll just stop because I can talk about online program initiatives all day. I'll leave you with just knowing that we are working on making sure that our graduates are ready to practice at bond graduation. And so the MPH being a practitioner's degree, we want to make sure that they're afforded the same kinds of opportunities that our ground students would have. And saying that, we have two, not one, but two mentoring programs. One is a peer mentoring program where you can be partnered or paired with a peer that's at least taken successfully 12 semester hours or 9 quarter hours at a CEEP accredited MPH program. And I've reached out to my partners, and they are replicating this particular program. So our students might grow up and be mentors to other MPH students across the country. And we have a professional mentoring program, because that mentorship relationship that you growing, if you're, irregardless of whether or not you're doing a career pivot or you're a traditionally aged student that's coming straight out of your undergraduate years, you want someone that's going to be guiding you through this process that's not necessarily your faculty member. So for students that say, hey, I think I want to be an epidemiologist, it's let's pair you with one so that you know what that is, so that you have a clear understanding of how to maneuver and how to grow in ways outside of the classroom. So I will stop there because I have a list. We're doing all kinds of fun things over in online programs.
I am interested to know your thoughts over the next few years. I think personally, public health is a field that is just constantly changing, adapting to the society around us, whatever public health disparities are in your city, in your neighborhood, it's just forever evolving. In regard specifically to public health education, online programming, where do you see that growing over the next 5 years or maybe 10 years?
I say that, and part of the goals for our Office of Online Programs is to be the preeminent source for online public health education in the world. That I can remember when the pendulum swung, when we started using PowerPoint slides. That's how old I am in the field, and that was a big deal, and people were uncomfortable with letting go of their overhead projectors. This is the next wave. And one of the things under Dean LaVeist's leadership we've been able to do as a school is propel ourselves forward, not looking back, not saying, hey, we're going to continue to do things the way we've always done them, because we understand that even working in communities, there's a technology piece to that. And so how do we train our practitioners so that they're able to deliver really great programs, boots on the ground, working with nonprofit organizations and their city governments across sectors? You gotta be technology literate. And one of the things that our program does is allows us to provide that in a virtual space. So our students have a heads up. You will see in the next, I would say, 5 to 10 years, the introduction of more doctoral programs. One of the initiatives that we have that no one really, that are in the nonprofit space, because there have been a couple of for-profit entities that have swum out into those waters, but none of our real peers have comprehensive DRPH programs focused on leadership, equity, and advocacy. No one else is doing that, and that's our next big thing. And so in 5 years, we will have graduated our first cohort of students that are in that space with those skills. I think the other thing that can't go unstated in this conversation based on your question is one of the other things that we've done here at the School of Public Health and Trop Med is we have someone who is focused on looking at what will practitioners need. Dr. Lena Moses I work very closely with her to look at, and she has her pulse on the curriculum and what are our students, what are the skill sets that our employers saying that our graduates need to have so that they're prepared. And not a lot, some of our schools are doing that. Lots of schools have directors of the MPH or directors of doctoral programs, but our directors are focused on making sure our students and our graduates have the skills needed, not just checking off the boxes as far as the curriculum goes. So it's looking at what are we doing inside the classroom and then co-curricularly outside of the classroom, irregardless of modality. So when we're in the virtual space or the traditional residential space, one of the things that we're doing is making sure that there's a seamless line or transition between what's happening in the tech world and how we are training our future public health practitioners.
I could listen to you talk about this all day because you can immediately tell how much you love what you do. So keep it up.
I also just want to say too, like Alicia mentioned, this is the future, right? And I think particularly, and this is kind of relates to one of the questions, like the question that was said earlier too, was that a lot of, like in my work, I encounter a lot of people who would love to come from, Kenya or Rwanda or Guatemala or whatever, but just cannot give up the 2 years to maybe move with their families. And so it does really seem like this is where we should be going, right?
Absolutely. And kind of related to that, we have a question in the Q&A. It's from Iris, who is in current online MPH program. And I think, Dr. Battle, you'll be able to answer this. Iris is a current online student who would love to join the peer-to-peer mentorship program. So could you talk about how that works?
Yes. If you can choose to be, because I know who Iris is, you can either be a mentor, or if you would like to take on a mentor, you can be a mentor or you can be a mentee. And if you're looking to be either way, there is a form that you fill out. You shoot me an email. I will share with you, because I'm on my iPad, so I can't drop it and just copy and paste it into the chat. I'm looking it up now. There is a URL that we use, and you just click on it, you fill out the form, and it's an interactive form. When you think about it, I call it speed dating kind of for mentors. The form is pretty comprehensive. It asks several demographic questions. And then it gives you a space to provide us with any additional information that we should know about you when we're considering who to match you with. And then there's a whole section where you get to choose what you're interested in. So you'll be matched with a mentor or a mentee that is also interested in some of the same things. For example, the form goes over the different research areas in public health. It talks about public health practice settings, so that if you're interested in getting a job working with African-American females in the inner city, and you're a single mom, and so you want someone who also understands being a single parent or a parent, you can share that information with us, and then the database kind of matches you up. So if you think about, and again, I can't think of anything other than a dating website that kind of matches interests of the people that are in there. That's the way we have an amazing IT team, and that's how our IT team set it up. So I'm going to look up the URL and drop it in the chat so that you and everyone else that's on this call can have access to that.
Thank you. Dean LaVeist, similarly to what we just talked about with Dr. Battle, thinking about health equity and the work you've done and the work the school is doing, where do you envision the strides that we're all taking now, taking public health in 5 or 10 years? Where do you envision us being down the road?
You mean as a school or as a field? So a number of things happening. We have announced, the president announced about a year ago the establishment of the Institute for Health Equity. Announced it before telling me, by the way, that I would be doing it. So we're building that out. So we're working on fundraising to establish the institute. We are looking to have build an endowment around it so that it can be something that becomes a permanent fixture at the university. That's one of my biggest initiatives right now, is to build out that institute. We have some announcements that'll be coming out soon that I'm not able to make right now about funding that we'll be getting to help build out a new initiative around health equity within the institute. We're also looking at building out a program that whether it be part of the Institute of Health Equity or not is not entirely clear yet, but it will certainly be linked with our health communications program, which is a program in public health and the arts. Where training in use of visual arts, performing arts, and even culinary arts within public health as a way of communicating, but also in a way of understanding human experience and a little bit differently. So these are just some of the initiatives that I'm excited about around health equity. We also have, we're building, pipeline programs not only in the on the online program. We're building pipeline relationships in the overall university. So, overall programming. So, we recently have completed a partnership with Pennsylvania. We're working on partnerships that we have formalized. We will be soon announcing partnerships with several colleges, including Dillard University, right here in New Orleans. So some of the, I don't want to get into naming some things because we're just not at a point where we can announce them all yet, but these are all initiatives in that area where we'll be building additional capacity to expand the diversity of our student body through those programs.
Absolutely, thank you. And Dr. Silvestri, thinking about diversity and inclusion and equity and things that you are working on and with the school, and maybe beyond, where do you see that field of public health being in 5-10 years from now, thinking about diversity? Do you think the things we're all doing now are going to be impactful? And do you think we can keep up this momentum as time goes on?
The only answer is yes, absolutely. It has to be impactful. Like we can't go back, right? Like we can only move forward in terms of, addressing and achieving health equity. Like that's how I see this. It's the same thing with, any work that you do, whether it's anti-racist or anti-colonialist or whatever, like the past is the past. Like we got to move forward and we got to really push for changes. So yes, and I feel there has been like a shift that you can sense among students, because in a lot of times too, it's the students who are pushing for these changes, who are asking, like they want to be better. How they're like, if I actually get to work and I'm facing this, how do I address this? How do I deal with this? And so we're getting a lot of interest from the students as well, that they want to be different types of public health practitioners. And I think it's also important that with the work that we're doing here in an academic setting, it's something that can influence other public health institutions that are not academic, right? So this is like what's happening in local public health departments, what's happening at the state health departments, et cetera. And so that's how our participation in, organizations like the American Public Health Association is really important, because then it gives us the opportunity to be able to share what we're doing as an academic institution, and then hopefully will be something that'll be able to be applied to other types of public health institutions as well. But I think it's, there's just no going back. There's no ignoring this anymore. And so, and if people are ignoring it, and if you are considering going to another school of public health and they're not talking about this, then that's a problem, right? Like if a school of public health is not talking about what we're doing to improve equity, diversity, and inclusion, then don't go there. How about that, Dylan?
Great answer. Thank you for that. And in talking about what, if you're watching and you're choosing a school, this, I guess, is a question for all of you. We'll start with Dean LaVeist. But can you just share any advice you have? You all kind of talked about you maybe stumbled upon public health or the particular area that you're in within public health, but can you just share some advice for those watching who want to grow a career in public health?
Yeah, you ask these really broad questions. Share some advice. This is a lot of advice to be shared. You know, I mean, I'll answer it this way. I think you have to follow your passion. Find that thing that will fuel you, that would that makes you get up in the morning and do this work. For me, it was understanding what was these racial disparities about, and why do they exist? What can we do about it? And that totally changed my direction and moved me into public health. And I haven't lost the interest and passion to address that problem yet. I don't anticipate that I ever will. So I'd like people to don't try to overthink it and try to think about, well, what's the future and what's and where should I focus, based on some sort of concept of where things are going. You certainly want to pay attention to that, but you need to figure out what's the issue that you really care about, because there are so many different things you can do with public health training, and figure out what is your thing, what's the mark that you want to make, and stay focused on that. Well, one other thing I want to say, a piece of really practical advice that I give to every public health student: whether your program requires you to take a course in program evaluation or not, you need to take a course in program evaluation. Take a course in program. One more time, you need to take a course in program evaluation. Even if you never conduct an evaluation, if you need to be a competent reader and consumer of evaluations. So you hire a consultant to do your evaluation for you, and you're reading it, and you don't know if what you're reading is gibberish. I think every public health professional needs to take a course. I don't care what department it's in. I don't care if it's in another school, because the logic of evaluation is the same regardless of what discipline you're in. So if nothing else, you need to at least understand the logic of evaluation. And the last thing I'd say is that even if you're not interested in research, you need to understand enough about research methods to be a competent reader of research, right? And so if you don't have that interest, you're not interested in quantitative, work, and you don't like the numbers, all of that is fine. You can still place for yourself in public health with that background, but you do need to understand enough to be able to know, am I reading competent science? Am I reading a competent evaluation? Is this what this person is saying to me something that I want to accept? So I would say that focus on developing those skills.
Thank you. And before I move on, I just want to remind everyone watching, please feel free to use the Q&A option to ask any questions that you have, and I'll be able to ask the panelists for you. Leslie, I know you've worked with a ton of students over the years, and you mentioned your particular background wasn't in public health. So have you noticed anything that has helped students you've worked with be successful at Tulane and coming into the field of public health? And as someone who didn't have that background but stumbled into the field of public health, do you have any advice for those interested?
Yeah, most definitely. All learning does not happen in the classroom. Definitely professional organizations, student organizations, associations are definitely there for you to join. So I would say get involved with your community. I know it was said to find your area of passion in public health. So definitely look for additional pathways outside of your everyday job to reach back out. So we have our student organizations. There are still students who are up and coming once you leave here. So also circling back with the school as alum to support those who are trying to get where you are, where you be, or where you'll be someday is definitely important for the future.
And Dr. Silvestri and Dr. Battle, I'd like both of your advice for those interested in public health as well.
I don't know if this is specifically for public health, but it's for life in general, right? So one is you have to take the approach that you're learning across the lifetime. You're not just going to be learning for 2 years. You're not going to be learning for 4 years. We learn across our lifetime. And this is something that we're also talking, right, with people when we're talking about things like implicit bias and how to, teach about racism in our classes. We have lots of different, experts in a lot of other fields. And then sometimes they feel a little hesitant to bring these issues up because it's not their area of expertise. Well, you can learn about it. You can educate yourself. And that's, I think, really the approach that you have to take, particularly in public health. While you might have something that you're very passionate about, you might become passionate about something else, and you will need to learn about it. So I just think in general, we really just need to have an approach that we never stop learning.
The only thing that I would add to what my colleagues have shared, because I would say ditto, is get a mentor. And you should probably have more than one. I have 3, and the mentor I've had that has shepherded me through every job interview process, doing mock interviews with me. I have conducted research with this person and published with this person. Get a mentor. And I have one that works with me with research kinds of things. And then one that, because my practice setting has always been higher education, this is someone who's an expert in higher ed administration. And so that I could be a better practitioner as a public health educator working with and for students. I have a higher ed mentor, and he's been a part of my life for the last 26 years. So again, finding a mentor, and they don't have to look like you. They don't have to be the same gender as you. Sometimes it's even helpful that they're not. But it has to be someone that you trust, that will tell you what for real. When you give them something, they're gonna be like, I love you enough and I care about you and your career trajectory enough to say, yeah, that doesn't make any sense, or here's something encouraging you to do more and be more and stretch yourself. So the only thing that I would add to what my colleagues have already said is get a mentor or 2.
I thought of one more.
Go ahead.
No, and that's just the make sure, so Leslie has mentioned some resources that are available for students. Alicia has mentioned resources that are available for students. Wherever, all schools offer resources for students, but not all students use these resources. So your university is offering tutoring, go to tutoring. If they're offering help on how to put together a resume or a CV, go and get help. Like there's nothing that you've already paid, your student fees have paid for these services. Like, go and use these services. I just was reviewing some CVs for a job application. It was very clear that some of those applicants had not gone through career services to look through their CVs. A mentor would do that for you as well. But again, it's all kind of together, like resources are available. Please use the resources.
Thank you. So we're getting some questions, which is awesome. Priscilla asked, what is the process in getting a mentor? How easy is it to get one? As an international student, can one get a mentorship abroad? Dr. Battle, you may have been talking in general about getting a mentor, seeking someone that you resonate with their research and the work they're doing, right? But does anyone want to add anything about maybe how they sought out a mentor in the past that might be helpful for our viewers?
I'll go first and then let the others share their stories. I asked my mentor, will you be my mentor? It was a formal, we sat down, I brought my stuff, and then understanding what that mentorship relationship denotes. it's a reciprocal interaction, but and that means that you're doing something. You don't get a mentor and the person is just pouring into you without you having to work and do something as well. So keeping that in mind, and then making the time, because like all other relationships that you have in your life, having a mentor, it takes a little bit of time, and it's not going to be the same as your relationship with your spouse or your child. It's not that kind of time, but it does take some effort. And so I would encourage, you to put in the work, because the relationship only works if you work it. And then don't be discouraged if someone that you have sought out to and asked to be your mentor, if they just don't have the time. It's not a personal indictment on you and who you are as a professional. It just means that mentor right now, and you should appreciate that they don't have the time to take on any additional mentees or responsibilities, because I have several mentees, but I also have to, my mentor reached out to me this morning. And so it's just remembering that keeping up with that relationship is vital and important. And it's okay to ask, and it's okay to get a no, but it doesn't mean that you don't continue to seek out the mentorship. I think it's important to understand that there is a relationship, and we do a program every fall. And we'll probably maybe even do one this summer if we can find the time, where we talk about the mentor relationship, how to set that up. I invite some of my mentor family, because I'm in the middle. So my mentees have access then to my mentors, and what that looks like across the relationship span, and the do's and don'ts. We have a whole program that we do with our students on that. And so we'll make sure that we put that out to our admitted students as an event as well.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add about securing a mentor?
No, what I was going to say, I think what Alicia said about securing a mentor is good. And also it can be a more of an informal relationship, and doesn't have to be one that spans across years. Maybe you want to get a new job and you just need someone to help you, get there. But I think the other important thing, and this is again, like kind of teaching, like be a mentor. You can also learn from mentoring someone else.
Absolutely. I had a question sent to me directly through the chat, and it was, again, I think for Dr. Battle. Can you talk about the structure of the online program? How do the classes work? How do students get, I guess, applied professional experience when participating?
Our online program is the sister program, for lack of a better way of describing it, to our residential ground program in community health science. While our application process is different, the programs are the same. So this information that you're getting in the classroom when you take the monitoring and evaluation class, for example, or design strategies course, it's the same course as that's being delivered to our residential students. It's just being delivered in a different modality. That said, the practical experience piece of that, we divide our courses into 3 different buckets. The first bucket would be foundational knowledge, which is our 5 foundational courses that all of the students, irregardless of department, take here at the School of Public Health. And then we have our general online courses that are unique to the community health science program. And then the last bucket is what we consider the practical application or the professional prep. And that is the practicum, the integrated learning experience, which is your culminating experience that happens at the very end of your time with us before graduation. And then what we have what's called an academic residency. It's an immersive experience that allows our students to get some boots on the ground, practical in-person experience, because they complete their entire degree program virtually. And so this is designed to be an in-person opportunity. COVID-19 has kind of hampered that particular effort in that we are not having students meet in person to do those kinds of things for travel. But quite certainly, if you're wanting to talk about practical things that students learn within any given course, for example, in the design strategies course, you are taught how to design a program. And we are very intentional at the I'm one of the instructors for that course. And at the beginning, students always walk in saying, I want to do this with this particular group of people. And they get hung up on the what they want to do as opposed to those skills that they need to know to do it. Because like Dean Levis said earlier, evaluation and monitoring and design strategy, it's the same. It doesn't matter whether or not you're planning a wedding, family reunion, or a public health program. They all, you can use a logic model, and there are inputs, outputs, and outcomes for all of those. And so our students are learning those practical skills that are transferable, irregardless of what practice setting you choose when you graduate. So all of our courses are kind of designed so that you have that in the space. One of the other things is our graduates will graduate with a portfolio. And so we ask them so that they have something that they can take with them and share with a potential employer that demonstrates, I do know how to design a program. This is the program that I proposed. That includes budget, the evaluation plan, the for a particular priority population. So we intentionally make sure that our students, irregardless of whether or not they're virtual or residential, get practical experience within the classroom, because that's the way the curriculum is set up and designed.
I want to talk more about the practical experience, but before we do that, can someone ask, are you able to start in an online program and then transition into an on-ground program, or is it when you apply for an online program, that's how you'll finish and graduate?
The hope is in the future, with, like Dean Levis said, our hope is to have a more seamless process. We are not there yet. So right now, when you apply for a program, you're not applying to necessarily just the School of Public Health. You're applying for a specific program in a specific department. So you can't apply for example, the health policy program and then think that you're just gonna smoothly transition into, epidemiology. It doesn't work like that. They have separate application requirements. The ground program application goes through SOPHIS, which is a common application process that schools of public health use. The online programs uses an internal application process we've had it happen where we have a residential student, and this is before COVID-19. We had a residential student, had something occur, life change, and they could not come back, but they wanted to transfer into. And so what we did, that we have a form that's set up and there's a transfer process, but the faculty in that particular department and that decide how that happens, so you can't apply to the online program in community health science and then automatically after a year decide you want to be in the ground program. There is a process for that. So yes and no. And in the future, hopefully we'll get to a point where you're just applying to the School of Public Health, and how you take your courses is based on what's happening in your life and what your interests are, and not necessarily we're having two camps. We often say we have one school, two modalities.
But so I think the important thing though is that it's not impossible, and we do work, because even, people transfer from other departments to our department, and there's a process, so it is possible. I mean, because we do want to be able to work with students to make sure that they get the program that they need and that they are interested in. So there is a process. And I should say, Alicia, I've had one student who did transfer from the online program into our department. Again, maybe we didn't have it wasn't like something we've done before, but we were willing, able to work with her
Yes.
to be able to, get her what she needed.
Right. And the hope is that, like I said, that we'll be able to have a process that's a little less clunky as we move forward. But it's growing pains, but not impossible.
Thank you. A lot of exciting things to look forward to for sure. So prior to COVID, and I think this will be my last question that I have for y'all. Prior to COVID, students were able to study abroad. We mentioned the word practicum earlier. For those of you who don't know, the practicum is that professional experience that maybe you're working with a nonprofit, maybe you're working internationally, but it's kind of the experience that you're going to get that will be built into your degree, so that you have that applied experience before you graduate. Dr. Silvestri, I want to ask you specifically, as someone who works very closely with students, and maybe even helps them network to get those practicum opportunities from time to time, are you hopeful that we'll get to a point in the future where our students will get back to studying abroad, seeking out those international practicum opportunities?
Maybe even this summer, honestly. So there's already, I just completed a letter of recommendation for an undergraduate program that's going to Ecuador. They're going to Ecuador. There's a trip that's going to Israel. So it's already starting to happen. At the university level, of course, it's a case-by-case basis in terms of international travel happening. But we are seeing, I'm a PI for a project in the Democratic Republic of Congo. People are starting to get approval to travel. And again, it's not, I wanted to mention before too, that Tulane, like most of us, I think everybody here has been vaccinated for COVID-19 because this was something that was offered pretty early on for School of Medicine, School of Public Health. But the university is also doing like the risk assessments so what does that mean? So we're vaccinated, but what about the people where we're gonna go, right? Are they vaccinated? What's the risk that comes to them from having, Tulane faculty and students there? So even as of now, I'm working with a couple of students who were returned Peace Corps volunteers in Guyana and who would like to go back and do their practicums in Guyana. I have been working with the Ministry of Health in Guyana, and it's again, like Alicia said, in a lot of things, it's clunky. It's definitely not a no. We just have to work through with legal, with general counsel at the university level to see if it's something that is possible.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions in the chat or the Q&A. So I want to thank, first of all, our panelists for taking the time today to chat with all of our viewers about what the school is doing and where the school is going. I think there is a lot to be hopeful about in regard to diversity and inclusion and getting beyond the pandemic, however long that might take. And I hope everyone who's not already a part of Tulane who's watching can see that Tulane is playing a really big part in moving us all forward. I hope everyone has enjoyed this town hall. So thank you to everyone who's watching, whether you're a part of Tulane or whether you hope to be a part of Tulane. I know our panelists appreciate it. I definitely appreciate it. Whether you've attended this session and all of our speaker sessions that happened, most of them have been recorded, with the exception of the film screening that happened yesterday, but I will be sending everyone who attended any session this week, I'll be sending all of you all of the sessions that happened so that you can view them, so that you can share them. It'll be a YouTube link on our school's YouTube page. So you will be able to view this session and others from National Public Health Week at Tulane. And again, thank you all for joining. I hope you got a lot out of today, and please email me. I'll put my email in the chat before I end the meeting. I will put you in touch with anybody that you need to speak with at Tulane if you'd like to do that. So thank you all for attending, and have a great Friday and a great rest of your weekend.